Climate Change Adaptation Financing, from Tracked Flows to Untapped Potential. Climate Change Adaptation Finance, critical to respond to climate risk, but still underdeveloped. Tracking of efforts remains inconsistent, and investment flows fall short of estimated needs. What constitutes an investment in adaptation? On the one hand, tagged investments, such as flood defenses, are explicitly identified as climate change adaptation measures. On the other hand, not tagged investments, such as modern irrigation systems, contribute to resilience but are not explicitly labeled as adaptation measures. There are other key aspects in framing adaptation. Adaptation can happen before, during, and after climate risks materialize. Adaptation and mitigation efforts often overlap. Adaptation finance is context-dependent, with a lack of common language, standards, and reporting requirements. Adaptation finance remains vastly insufficient when compared to estimated needs. According to the CPI, developing countries require $222 billion per year until 2030 to reduce the impacts of climate change. The implementation of national adaptation plans and nationally determined contributions of these countries would require $387 billion. Still, in 2023, global adaptation finance amounted to only $65 billion, or only 3.4% of total climate flows. To have a comprehensive overview of the financial ecosystem for climate adaptation, one can see how funds flow from various sources to concrete adaptation investments. The figure here categorizes the sources of finance into three main groups: public domestic, such as national governments, private, and public international, such as multilateral organizations. These sources channel funds through a variety of mechanisms, including public investment, procurement, corporate spending, debt instruments, consumer purchases, and private equity. Ultimately, these financial flows support a range of adaptation investments that can yield financial and socioeconomic returns. Concessional loans and grants, especially from public sources, still dominate adaptation funding, but there is increased experimentation with other instruments. For instance, blended finance makes use of concessional capital to de-risk private investments. Green bonds and similar bonds are earmarked for climate investments and already common for mitigation, while insurance-linked instruments, such as resilience bonds, transfer climate risk to capital markets and have potential to scale. However, there are still barriers hindering private investments in adaptation, such as perceived high risk and uncertain returns, which delay action. Lack of direct revenues reduce financial appeal. The lack of climate risk data hinders pricing and targeting, and the prioritization of self-interest leads to shifting risks onto others. Despite growing attention and investment, there is still no universally accepted or operationally ideal definition of what constitutes adaptation finance. On this point, we can make the following recommendation. Governments should develop national adaptation taxonomies and integrate adaptation into budget tagging. Multilateral development banks and donors could support capacity building for adaptation finance tracking and reporting. The private sector needs to engage in blended finance mechanisms and disclose adaptation-related investments. And finally, researchers could advance methodologies for identifying and evaluating adaptation finance flows. In conclusion, there are already signs pointing to a growing and underexplored market, which includes investment opportunities in resilient infrastructure, climate-smart agriculture, risk management, and health systems. There are also emerging opportunities for new businesses to be created and scaled by offering solutions tailored to a rapidly changing climate reality. Adaptation finance needs to be reframed not simply as a cost, but as an investment in resilience, stability, and opportunity. For more, please refer to the technical paper Climate Change Adaptation Financing, from Tracked Flows to Untapped Potential. Thank you.